Hello folks, welcome to Momentum Gaming TV channel. Today I'm gonna talk about Molten Core, the attunement you need to complete to easy access the raid and all the bosses you will encounter. To enter in Molten Core, players must complete an attunement. This gives easier access to the raid rather than requiring you to run all the way through Blackrock depths. While it's not necessary to enter Molten Core, it does shorten the time you need to get there. The quest is called Attunement to the Core. Players must speak with Lothos Riftwaker in Blackrock Mountain to obtain the quest. This quest requires players to bring him a core fragment, which can be collected near the Molten Core entrance in Blackrock Depth. Once completed, players are granted access to the entrance of Molten Core through teleport entering the window at the left of Lothos Riftwaker. Now, let's briefly explain the boss fights and combat tactics for each boss. The first one is Lucifron. This boss uses various spells, including Impending Doom and Curse of Tongues. Players should interrupt these spells as much as possible and avoid standing in the area of effect for Lucifron's Impending Doom. As many of Lucifron's abilities can be outranged, it is important to have enough room to fight him. Wait till Lucifron patrols near Magmadar's location, then pull the first Core Hound pack to have enough room to fight the boss. It is also of utmost importance to not go back to the tunnels the raid came from. The imps that spawn there have a short respawn timer, and growing them accidentally during the Lucifron fight will most certainly cause a wipe. As Lucifron's lieutenants can cast Dominate Mind, right as Lucifron is pulled and positioning threat is being established, it is heavily recommended for the whole raid, but 2 tanks and a couple dummy players to stay back until everything is under control. Lucifron is accompanied by 2 Flamewaker protectors, which must be tanked away from the raid, but still close to Lucifron himself, so melee attackers are able to cleave the ads. As their abilities can be nastier than Lucifron's, it is heavily recommended to kill them before killing Lucifron himself. Magmadar. This boss has a powerful melee attack and frequently applies a debuff called Panic. Players should position themselves so that they can quickly move out of the way when Magmadar uses his Aeofear ability. Before the pull, all Core Hound packs before Magmadar should be dealt with prior to engaging Magmadar. The main tank should be able to tank Magmadar right where he stands, only needing to move once he is hit by Lava Bomb. After about 20-30 seconds after Magmadar is engaged, 2 Core Hound will spawn right next to the boss. Similar to the Core Hound packs, right before Magmadar, these ads will respawn if they aren't all killed at the same time. 2 Core Hound will continue to spawn about every minute. Lava Bomb is cast much more frequently, leaving many more patches of flame on the ground. Magmadar has few mechanics, but many of them require careful positioning or precise reaction. Compared to Lucifron, Molten Core's first boss, the healing requirements for Magmadar are significantly higher. Frenzy. Magmadar will buff himself often with this ability, increasing his attack speed for 150 for 8 seconds. This ability is extremely dangerous to tanks. Hunters with Tranquilizing Shot must dispel Frenzy as soon as the buff is applied to Magmadar. Save mana to dispel. Frenzy is not only dangerous because of the increased attack speed, but also because Magmadar will periodically damage the tank and all targets in a cone in front of him via lava breath. Lava Bomb. Magmadar launches a lava bomb at the target, dealing fire damage and leaving a fire patch on the floor. This ability can hit anyone, including both the tank and healer's range deeps. If you're targeted by Lava Bomb, move out of the flame patch. The ability leaves on the floor. As healing requirements for Magmadar are quite high, bandaging after moving out of the flame patch is usually a good idea. Panic. Magmadar panics. Magmadar panics nearby enemies, sending them away in fear for 8 seconds. Magma Spits. Magmadar spits fire at nearby targets, applying a fire damage dot. Lasts 30 seconds stacks up to 3 times. Gehennas. This boss primarily uses fire-based spells, including Rain of Fire and Immolate. Players should avoid standing in these areas of effect and use ranged attacks to keep Gehennas at a distance. Before the pull, clear the entire area around Gehennas to have enough people to fight the Flamewaker. You will want to tank Gehennas in the center of the room, with his 2 guards to the southwest of the room. Druids and mages can decurse Gehennas' curse. Gehennas' mechanics are relatively easy to deal with, as most of them require simply to move out or decurse. It is recommended to deal with the adds before killing Gehennas. Gehennas! The main Flamewaker has 3 abilities. The first is Rain of Fire. Gehennas calls down a molten rain, dealing fire damage to all enemies in the selected area for 6 seconds. Dealing with this ability is simple. Just move out a bit if it's cast on you. Gehennas' Curse. This ability decreases all healing taken from the target by 75s for 5 minutes. Gehennas will cast this ability on the entire raid, roughly every 15 seconds. Mages will spend a majority of the fight helping the druids decurse the raid instead of deep sing. Priority targets for dispelling are the tanks, melee deeps, and the rest of the raid. Shadow Bolt. Gehennas fires a shadowy bolt at a random raid member, dealing shadow damage. Very simple ability, just heal the person hit with the shadow bolt. Garr, this boss, summons a number of adds called Garr's minions. Players should focus on killing these minions quickly, as they can deal significant damage to the raid. Warlocks are able to completely CC Garr's adds with Banish. The fight becomes significantly easier the more warlocks you have in the raid. Before the pull, although Garr's area is relatively away from trash mobs, it is still advised to clear the molten giants and elementals that are close to Garr's area. As adds explode when they die, someone might be knocked back onto uncleared trash mob. Garr should be tanked at around 15 yards away from the raid, and his adds should be killed one by one. The abilities of Garr are anti-magic pulses. He lets out anti-magic pulses, removing a beneficial effect from players in the raid. Magma Shackles. Garr reduces the movement speed of nearby enemies by 60s for 15 seconds. This ability can be dangerous if a melee is nearby an exploding fire swarm. This can be stopped by tanking Garr's adds away from Garr, but be careful to not trigger separation anxiety, which occurs when the fire swarms are 15 yards or further away from Garr. Fire swarms immolate their target, dealing fire damage instantly and more fire damage over 21 seconds. On death, fire swarms will explode, dealing massive fire damage and knocking players back. Eruption has a 15-yard range. Melee players should move away as they're about to die, and let the ranged finish the adds. Baron Geddon. This boss uses various AoE abilities, including Living Bomb and Inferno. Players should spread out to avoid taking too much damage from these abilities. The first ability is Living Bomb. Geddon transforms an enemy into a bomb. After 8 seconds, the bomb explodes, inflicting heavy fire damage on themselves and all nearby players, knocking them up. Players with Living Bomb must immediately run away from everyone in the raid, to not risk exploding on anyone. Paladins and mages are able to immune Living Bomb via Divine Shield and Ice Block, although they still need to run away from their allies. Before the pull, Baron Geddon patrols through the entire later area of Molten Core. The safest way to engage Geddon is to pull him all the way back to Garr's room. This allows the raid to stand in a line formation, which allows them to safely deal with Ignite Mana, which burns a random target, burning their mana every 3 seconds. Every point of mana burned also deals damage to the target. Paladins and priests must dispel Ignite Mana from the raid. Geddon must be tanked in an open area with enough space for melee players to run away from Geddon safely during Inferno that periodically inflict fire damage to nearby enemies for 8 seconds. While casting Inferno, Geddon cannot move or cast his abilities. For classes with fire abilities, Baron Geddon is completely immune to them, so refrain from using them. When near death, Geddon creates an Armageddon, exploding after 8 seconds and dealing lethal fire damage to the entire raid. Geddon will only cast this when near death. The raid should have enough DPs to simply burn him and kill the boss before he completes the cast. Shazzrah. This boss primarily uses arcane-based spells, including Arcane Explosion and Curse of Shazzrah. Players should interrupt these spells as much as possible and avoid standing in areas of effect. Before the pull, due to the nature of Blink, Shazzrah needs to be engaged in a room with as much space as possible. You can either kill Baron Geddon first and pour all trash around Shazzrah's area, or kite Shazzrah back to Garr's room. Shazzrah curses the raid, doubling magic damage taken for 5 minutes. This is cast roughly every 10 seconds. Mages and druids must dispel instead doing damage. Shazzrah releases an arcane explosion, dealing arcane damage to all nearby players. This is cast roughly every 4 seconds. Shazzrah teleports on top of a random player, clearing all threat in the process. This is cast roughly every 30 seconds, but times can vary. After a blink, all raid members must stop dupes and let the tanks establish aggro before attacking again. If you're the target, Shazzrah used blink on. Run to the tanks and then away from Shazzrah once they pick aggro. Shazzrah counterspells the raid. If casting while caught by counterspell, you will be unable to cast spells of that spell school for 10 seconds. This is cast roughly every 15 seconds. Shazzrah buffs himself, reducing all magical damage taken by 50s for 30 seconds. This is cast roughly every 10 seconds. Priest can remove it with Dispel magic. Shaman can remove it with Purge. Sulfuron Harbinger. This boss has a powerful melee attack and frequently summons adds called Sons of Flame. Players should focus on killing these adds quickly and avoid standing in the areas of effect for Sulfuron's abilities. Sulfuron requires a high number of tanks, 5 to be precise, to control himself and his 4 adds. The most geared tank must tank Sulfuron on the back of his room, and the other tanks must tank his adds away from Sulfuron, as to not risk them being affected by Sulfuron's Inspire, which increase a nearby. Ally physical damage by 25 and attack speed by 100. Each one of Sulfuron's Flamewake priests must have people assigned to interrupt their dark mending, which heal a nearby ally. The adds can cast Immolate and Shadow Word Bane that must be dispelled as soon as possible by priests and paladins. Sulfuron knocks all nearby targets back when he casts Hand of Ragnaros, dealing fire damage and stunning for 2 seconds. As this ability has a very small 10-yard range, anyone who is not Sulfuron's tank or a melee depth can simply outrange the ability. Golemagg the Incinerator. This boss has a powerful AoE ability called Magma Splash, which deals significant damage to anyone standing nearby. Players should spread out to avoid taking too much damage from this ability. Golemagg is tanked by the area he's at. This fight requires at least 4 tanks, 2 for Golemagg himself so they can swap between themselves when at high stacks of Magma Splash, because it reduces armor, and 1 tank for each core rager. The tanks, dealing with Golemagg, must have high amounts of fire resistance to survive higher stacks of Magma Splash. Golemagg pyroblasts a random player, dealing fire damage and leaving an additional fire dot on them. Just over the target. At 10 health, Golemagg will Earthquake, dealing physical damage to all players every couple seconds. This serves as Golemagg's Enrage. Simply continue focusing DPs and defeat the boss before the damage becomes too much for your healers to handle. Golemagg is accompanied by 2 core Ragers. Their abilities can be a bit dangerous. But as they cannot die while Golemagg is alive, they can be ignored while Golemagg stands, but they will need to be killed after Golemagg dies for the encounter to be completed. Golemagg's core rages will deal increased damage and have 50's increased attack speed if tanked too close to Golemagg. Core rages mangle their target, reducing movement speed by 50's and leaving a physical damage dot. Warlocks are able to help the off-tanks by debuffing Golemagg's adds through the entire fight via Curse of Weakness. The core rages will refuse to die while Golemagg is alive, so the entire raid must focus taps on Golemagg. As he is nearing death, the melee attackers can start moving to the core rages to start whittling them down, but be mindful of the earthquakes at 10's hit. Majordomo Executus. This boss has a number of powerful abilities, including teleport and flame shock. Players should focus on killing the adds that spawn during this fight, and interrupt Majordomo spells as much as possible. Mages can use Polymorph to CC Flamewaker Healer. Hunters can be used to kite the Flamewaker Elite, adds to make the fight much more manageable. Majordomo Executus should be tanked out of the way on the far side of the coal pit found in the boss room. Majordomo can't be killed, so you just need to keep him occupied while you clear out his Flamewaker companions. You don't defeat Majordomo directly. Instead, you are focused on killing his 8 Flamewaker companions. Once you've dealt with all 8 adds, Majordomo will stop the fight and reward you with loot via Catchy of the Fire Lord. Majordomo casts 2 type of spells, Aegis of Ragnaros, or Damage Shield, which protects allies and deal damage to melees which attacks them, and Magic Reflection, the most dangerous ability of the fight. This ability is particularly dangerous to casters, as you can very easily take yourself out of them. Fight! If you aren't paying attention. Majordomo casts also teleport. That only pertains to the person tanking Majordomo himself. This ability will teleport Majordomo's primary threat target into the coals found at the center of the boss room. Because of this, you will want to position Majordomo on the opposite side of the coals, so the tank can easily pick the boss back up as he runs towards the raid. Regarding Flamewalker Elite and Healer, as said before, they shall be kited and polymorphed by hunters and mages. The adds casts Shadow Bolt and Shocks, or Fireball and Fire Blast. That should not be a problem if you control the adds, so just heal all the players targeted by these spells. Ragnaros. This final boss of Molten Core. He has a number of powerful abilities, including Wrath of Ragnaros and Sons of Flame. Players should avoid standing in the areas of effect with these abilities and focus on dealing damage to Ragnaros when he is vulnerable. Ragnaros has 2 main abilities during the first phase. Melee and tank players will have to deal with Wrath of Ragnaros, while ranged players have to deal with Lava Burst. These abilities don't require a tremendous amount of mechanical prowess to avoid, but rather require proper positioning to make sure the raid takes as little damage as possible. Melee players will be stacked behind the boss. To avoid Wrath of Ragnaros, you will be required to run out of range when the timer is about to run down. After that, he will send any nearby players, dealing a small amount of fire damage and displacing them throughout his chamber. For tanks, this mechanic represents the main reason to bring fire resistance gear to the fight. It's possible for you to resist each wave of this ability and solo tank the boss until dead. If you don't have enough fire resistance to avoid being knocked back, you will need another tank waiting by, ready to pick up the boss. Ranged players should be stacked in pairs of 2 all around the room to mitigate as much lava burst damage as possible. After 3 minutes of combat, Ragnaros will submerge and summon several Son of Flame enemies to swarm and attack your raid. It's important to note that the Sons will mana burn nearby targets, and you'll want to crowd control these adds and keep them away from healers. Because of this, it is good to bring hunters for their frost trap, as it will greatly slow the enemies that spawn. Similarly, mages can take full advantage of their spells, like Frost Nova, to root and slow these enemies. Once you have killed all of the Sons, Ragnaros will re-emerge and the fight will begin again with the normal Phase 1 mechanics. Note, with good DPs it is actually possible to skip the submerge and save your raid the trouble of dealing with this mechanic. And don't forget that paladins and shamans bring group-wide fire resistance in the form of fire resistance aura and fire resistance totem. Overall, combat tactics for each boss in Molten Core involve avoiding areas of effect, interrupting spells as much as possible, and focusing on adds when they spawn. With the right strategy and coordination, players can successfully defeat each boss and emerge victorious from this iconic raid. Hope you enjoyed my brief explanation through the video, and if so, please consider to subscribe to the channel and help to grow this beautiful community. You will find all the links to support my channels down in the description below. Thanks a bunch, and see you on the next one, folks.